Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 10th edition of the Cluster API Azure subproject meeting. This is the kickoff meeting, so welcome to everyone who has joined the call so far. This is a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, and in general, just be awesome people, right? So we've got a few things on the agenda. I want to give some time, since this is a kickoff meeting, to do some introductions. So let's go around the room and just say who you are, where you're from, what you're looking to get out of this, and then we can move into the agenda items. So I'll go down the list. Ace.
Hi, so I'm Ace. I work at Microsoft. I am kind of a Kubernetes user and part-time contributor to the community. I sort of found Cluster API a while back while exploring just bootstrapping solutions out there and really into this whole kind of lifecycle controller model of managing clusters.
Awesome. Welcome. Cecile?
Hello, I'm Cecile. I work at Microsoft as well. I'm on the Kubernetes upstream team, working with a bunch of other folks on this call on bringing awesome Kubernetes on Azure and contributing back to the open source world.
Welcome, Cecile.
KAPZ.
David. Mr. Justice, you're muted, or we can't hear you. Our Microsoft rooms, right?
Okay.
So,
So
yes.
for whatever reason, I'm having to talk through Cecile. Cecile, can you move your mouth while I talk? I work with Cecile on AKS Engine, and definitely interested in taking the learnings that we have from there and helping move KAPZ forward.
Cool. Welcome. Henrik?
Yeah, I'm Henrik, also work at Microsoft, and I'm here out of personal interest. So, yeah.
Sweet. Welcome. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I also work for Microsoft, and I'm here because I work as a client-facing engineer, mainly working supporting customers with Kubernetes. And I found Cluster API just by chance, and I thought it was a really interesting project, so I'm looking to contribute in any way I can.
Cool. Welcome. Wan Lee?
Unmuted.
All right, I'm also talking through the same for Interior, talking to Cecile's microphone. So I'm Wan Li Peng. I'm an engineer on the AKS team at Microsoft, and I'm interested in helping advance the state-of-the-art of cluster lifecycle.
Yeah, welcome. Nick?
Hey, I'm Nicholas Lane. I work for Wayfair, but formerly I was a part of Steven's team at VMware. I've been working on KAPZ since when we first migrated it from a company-based repo from another company and then moved it into Kubernetes SIGs. And I think my number one contribution to the project has been basically serving as a rubber duck for Steven all this time. So yeah, I'm hoping to just get to meet everyone and continue working with everyone on this project. I think it's a lot of fun.
Welcome. Rita?
Hey everyone, I'm Rita, also Microsoft. I'm on the container upstream team. Part of the being on this call is to understand status, blockers, and making sure we have alignment with all the other upstream projects we have. So nice to meet you guys.
Hey, Rita. Sertaj?
Hey everyone, my name is Sertaj, based in San Francisco for Microsoft. Yeah, excited to for the Cluster API Azure. Yeah, I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, welcome. Tunde?
Hi everyone. My name is Tunde. I work at VMware, and I'm just looking to help where I can.
Awesome. Welcome, Tunde. And finally, Vince?
Hello, Vince, VMware. I'm here mostly from Cluster API. I'm one of the maintainer of Upstream Cluster API and trying to make a V1 Alpha 2 happens for you all. So I'm here to help.
Awesome. Okay, intros out of the way. Let's get to the agenda now. So we've got a few things. We've done the welcomes. We can do a quick, I'll share my screen, and we can take a quick look at the test grid board. So we've got a primary board, and we've also got a board for image pushes. So let's see what we're looking at. Okay, all right, so there are some flaky and failing things on this board right now, and this is kind of a result of us moving from the V1 Alpha 1 tests and to the V1 Alpha 2 tests. So the ones that you notice on this board that do not have Bazel in the name are the ones that we should be taking a look at. So we care about the push images job, PR test, PR build, PR integration, and verify. I believe the verify boilerplate is kind of shoved into the verify job now. So these tests will eventually go away once they have timed out in terms of test results. So basically there's like a timeout period for the test results, and now that both the V1 Alpha 1 and 2 branches are strictly on the new tests, those will fade away soon. So nothing to worry about there. Everything is passing on master. Happy, happy day. The image pushes board, we had a few failures at the beginning. I think this is when I was still wiring up the jobs, and this was, I think, immediately after we had cut the V30 Alpha 1 release or something. So there was a few initial failures there, but those have cleaned up since then. So yeah, so for anyone who's not familiar with test grid, you can click into the links here on the agenda and poke around at test grid. Basically, all of the SIGs have groups as well as boards. Rather, they have tabs as well as our groups, and tabs within the groups, I think, is the way it's organized. But you can arbitrarily go to a SIG and look at the, so KubeADM tests and see how those are performing, right? And this is a list of, and then you can tab into each of the tests and see details. So that's test grid. That's the 5-cent tour of test grid. So, all right, so planning a V1 Alpha 2 official cut. I think it's maybe worthwhile to, so how many people on the call are not familiar with what we're talking about when we say V1 Alpha 2? Okay, cool. All right. So for anyone who's listening to the recording later, there's a differentiation between V1 Alpha 1 and V1 Alpha 2. These are essentially API versions of Cluster API, right? So we're saying that we are, this is a work around aligning the downstream provider, Azure, with the upstream Cluster API versions, right? So we're currently working on the V1 Alpha 2 work. It has been going phenomenally well. Large thanks to Cecile for crunching away on that for the last I guess it's a little less than a month now. We kind of turned this around quickly. Vince for kind of advising us and making sure that we were doing the right things as we were transforming the repo from V1 Alpha 2, V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2. So we've got a few things that we want to get done before we, I guess, before we close this out. One of the things that came up was image building, right? So we should talk about the image building a little bit. Cecile, do you want to?
Yeah. So image builder. So for people who aren't familiar with what this means is, so basically there's this new requirement, since we're now using the KubeADM bootstrap provider in common with other Cluster API infra providers. And that new Bootstrap provider has a requirement. It expects images that are used in to provision VMs to have some things pre-installed, like CNI and Kubernetes. And so we couldn't basically like build cluster with v1 alpha 2 before we had that those images kind of built. So I expect the like image building process will evolve in the future, and it seems pretty new from what I've seen and from what I understand. But so far, we just wanted to match the requirements of what's there, just so we can build clusters that are functional. And so where we're at is there's this PR that Vince started and I took over, which is merged now, which basically adds Azure to the image builder repo. And so what that is just a Packer definition. And it builds images into two different formats, VHDs and managed images, which are put in a shared image gallery. And so right now, this is just a definition. And so anyone can use that to just like make an image in your own subscription. And then once you have that image, you can use that to build a CabZ cluster. And yeah, so I think we need to figure out how to get those available publicly and how we want to enforce like defaults for images and how we want to have a process around publishing new images. You're muted, Stephen.
Yeah, so you know, last week I was playing around with this a little bit while you were coming back from conference and stuff, and I think we made the decision to publish both VHD and the managed images are publishing to a shared image gallery for the sake of people who are interested in building these images outside of the standard publishing process, right? On one hand, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, this is based on my digging around. The requirement for publishing images to the marketplace is that the image is a VHD, right?
Yeah.
So we need both techniques, right? Where the VHD is not necessarily useful to someone who may come in and just wants something that is maybe published behind a corporate firewall or something, right? Or a company subscription, right? So if you check out, let me see if I can find this now. So if you check out, I have a PR that is merged now. That's available in master. Sparkles, all right. And that's here.
While you're finding that, I actually got in touch with the marketplace people, and they're working on adding support for publishing managed images, so we wouldn't have to have only yeah,
okay,
but that's
awesome.
not available right now.
Okay. So that I just posted in the chat. I'm dropping in the agenda right now. That PR will allow you to choose between images that are published to a shared image gallery, or so you can specify images that are posted to a shared image gallery by ID or by specifying the name of the image, the publisher, the name of the image, the subscription ID, resource group, gallery, and the version, right? So right now in CabZ, you can specify either published images or shared image gallery images. So what we need to figure out next is the point at which we can remove a bunch of the pre-kubeadm commands, right?
So I'm actually already past that. So I have a branch that I've been using to test, and I removed all the pre-kube ADM commands and the post ones that you added for the add-ons. And so that works. I was able to build a cluster successfully with an image that I built with the current image builder code.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think I might have shared this with you as well. I have a branch floating around that is, okay, you actually have a PR that I think gets us to the last mile of it.
Yeah.
So it's around, so after removing the pre-kubeadm commands, and people who are not familiar with the pre-kubeadm commands, for your post-kubeadm commands, there is now a bootstrap provider within within the cluster API ecosystem, right? So it's what KABPK is the acronym. So cluster API bootstrap provider kubeadm, right? And by specifying a spec against that, you can define some commands to run prior to kubeadm, either a init or join, and then also post kubeadm init and join. So what we were doing, because we were not using published images in the meantime, was essentially shoving a bootstrap script into the pre-kubeadm commands, right? And then for the control plane 0, we're also applying the add-ons, right? So the reason we're doing the applying the add-ons as a post kubeadm command is because we are essentially, our clusters are not up, or they're not recognized as a running control plane by the time that the command's complete, if you're using make create cluster management, or I think that's the name of the target, right? So basically, there's one step of create cluster management that applies the add-ons, but the cluster is not ready to receive the add-ons because it doesn't exist yet. So we essentially do that task after the kubeadm init within the first control plane. So the PR that was just merged already. Wow, awesome. So there's a PR from Cecile 1517 in the cluster API repo, which I will also pop in the chat with here.
I just pasted it.
Okay, cool. Which will increase the timeout for the apply add-ons phase of the make create cluster management target, which will allow us to essentially wait. Based on what I think Cecile and I saw, turning up clusters, it takes about a little less than 5 minutes for the first control plane to come up once you're using a built image.
So it's not increasing the timeout. It's just that we weren't retrying before because that error wasn't being caught as one of those errors that we want to retry.
Okay.
So the timeout is fine. The timeout is already 10 minutes, but it's just that we weren't retrying. So it was just failing after one error.
Helpful if I read the PR.
It was all Vince's idea. I didn't do anything. I just did what he told me.
All right, so we should be. So we're getting really close now, right? I think that. So we need to. So I guess we need to get timeline on the marketplace stuff, or do we want to decide that someone should go about building their own image in the meantime?
I think we should start branching out on different tasks because I think we're ready to not have one single thread anymore, and there's a lot of people here that want to contribute and help. And so
yeah, I know we're definitely at that point. I'm just saying, like, for us to, what I mean is for us to cut an alpha 2, or for us to cut exactly. We can't do it until everything works, right? So
build your own image for now is okay, but I'm open to other people's.
We could get a unlisted market. We could get an unlisted marketplace image.
Unlisted?
What do you mean by unlisted?
Unlisted meaning not public. As long as you have the image reference information, you could pick it up. Similar to what we do with.
So public, but not like hidden from the UI. Basically.
Precisely.
Okay.
But we need an individual image for every Kubernetes version.
Yeah. And we need the logic to pick the right image depending on which Kubernetes version you're using.
Yeah.
There's still a bit of work there.
So Vince, how are we doing that in different variants, or is it, or I guess specifically for AWS, is it make sure you pick the right image as opposed to figuring it out for you?
Well, it's what Cecile was saying. It's there's logic in Kappa that picks the image based on the Kubernetes version you specify. Same for KapG. Although CapG, I think, actually only looks at the 1 point something. It doesn't look at the patch. And then you can just like say, like, I want the latest of this kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
So I'm wondering, so in terms of versioning the images, I know we were kind of going back and forth on like what we want to call them. I think it makes sense to encapsulate the fact that it's cluster API, the OS version. And then what should our version be? Should our version be, I was initially thinking it should be based on the CapZ version or the CapZ version. Or should it be the Kubernetes version?
We use the Kubernetes version.
Okay.
So Kubernetes version, is that the version or the SKU? Because if you want to be able to get the latest.
So we would use the
Yeah, you probably need the Kubernetes version in the SKU, because if you put it in the version, that means you can have two images that are like different Kubernetes version, and one is later than the other, but you want to take the
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably actually need both, right?
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so we should think about that.
I
let's
sense some long image tags coming.
that's what I'm worried about. All right, let me just add that.
Maybe that needs to be a task, like figure out how the images are going to work. But the question is, do we want to block the release until that's done, or do we want to proceed with the release and do that task in parallel?
We need, so what we need is something that works for quick start, right? So when we add something to the quick start, it needs to be able to work out of the box, right? There should be limited guesswork for whatever user's picking it up. I think that, you know, pretty much everyone on the call that has been working on this across VMware and Microsoft already know the intricacies of like doing it if they needed to, but we can't make that assumption for anyone else, right? So.
Can that quick start include a make command from the image builder repo?
From what I saw from the quick start, it includes like the infrastructure component YAML and then some instructions about how to curl to base 64 decode certain things if you need to, depending on what provider you're dealing with. So we need them to not be required to use the repo, right? It should be able to, they should be able to curl components and get it done. So if we need to, so if the, I guess if the examples that we publish are the infrastructure components that we publish with the release include the ID for this unlisted image, then that would make sense probably.
I would just code it in the code for now.
Yeah, that means we need the image published.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can have the unlisted hard-coded ID based on what David was saying, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to end up having get image functionality anyway. Perhaps a proposal with the naming, and then add the get image function, and
okay,
we could do it.
Okay, cool. So can I this is just adding this as an AI. I can add this to the board later. I know that Ace, you had your hand up.
That's my bad, sorry.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think so David, something like that. I'm not sure that we need to differentiate. So we can call whatever the publisher name is cluster API, or it can be Kubernetes, and the offer can be cluster API. I don't think that we need to say that it's CapZ because it's on Azure, right? Then the SKU would need to include it would need to include the distro and the version of the distro. And then the version, I think we should plan to publish images when we cut releases, right? So the version should be pinned to a version of Cluster API, Azure, Cluster API, Azure.
as something else to take into account that we've run into previously building images, you can't have more than, I think there's a hard limit on the number of versions that you can have per SKU if you're a third-party publisher. And so we're not, like, if we don't have, we're getting per Kubernetes version per distro, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, you can't publish unlimited versions to the same SKU.
So we could start dropping them off, but that's kind of a bad situation. So either we put the version of CapZ into the SKU itself, or we say that only keeping so many backwards. That seems like
How many is the
But
limit?
It's 24, I think, right now.
Cecile, is that limit also applying to manage images? I thought it was only for VHDs.
It's for I mean, in the publisher portal, when you're publishing an image to the marketplace, that's where the thing applies.
it might even be 8, and we haven't extended it.
Yeah, I think it was, no, I think it was 8 at some point and then increased it to 24. I think that was for everyone.
It's a pretty onerous limit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it definitely sounds like we need to, one, discuss what the image versioning looks like, as well as having logic for discovering images based on the Kubernetes version.
And whether we want to always keep them around or if we're going to deprecate them at some point. That's also something to think about.
Okay. All right. So what else do we feel like we need for a release? I would say after that, I think we're probably good to release, right?
I'd say docs and tests are on the table.
Yeah, no, okay. So the docs are in my head. I'm already working on them. Yeah. Docs are my most important thing before a release.
And then testing, I know we already talked about this. If someone wants to start working on end-to-end testing, and I don't think we need to block the release for that, but we should definitely have it as one of the top priority tasks.
Yes. I think that, so I think we had maybe a difference of opinion between whether the end-to-end or the unit tests are the right target. I would like the end-to-ends to be the primary focus because we can shove those into a pre-submit. I know that we care about the behavior of the individual pieces of the code, but I also care about the behavior of the cluster. And I think that is probably the higher, the best bang for your buck if someone lands end-to-end tests first.
Also, FYI, we have some testing utilities now upstream that you can use, and Cap is a good example on how to write end-to-end tests, so that it makes it easier for you to just like get bootstrapped.
Okay, cool. All right, so let us. All right, I see a new task here. So before we do the project board review, I'm going to drop that to the bottom of the list because that will take the longest. And so machine pool. I know, Wanli, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Before we go into that, I added a PSA that like Cappy Master is now on V1 Alpha 3, so expect breaking changes. And like if your Go mod is pointing to master, please don't, and move it to release 0.2 branch, but prefer released versions.
Okay, I believe we should be in the clear there. I am just checking now. Yeah, we're on 0.2.3 right now.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Okay. So there's one question actually. Let's go for the machine pool thing.
All right. Sounds good. So I posted a link to the doc in Slack channel this morning, and I think Vince already took a look, at least took a quick pass. So looking for feedback on that. So if anybody is interested in having any say in what goes out, please give me feedback there. I'm in the process of wrapping up that code and moving it into, or my POC code and moving it into the CapZ repo so that we can start to play with proof of concept. And once that's ready, I think people can start looking at it and start trying some things out. I think really that's about it in terms of updates I have there. Did anybody have a look and have questions that they wanted to talk about in person?
So just to frame it for people on the recording, so the machine pool concept is essentially we want to create a new type, a type that would be essentially provider agnostic and provide the means to understand what scaling could be across a provider. So the classic auto scaling is like I have X amount of replicas and I want this many and I shouldn't go above this many and I should do these things when, right? So abstracting as much of that as we can away to a singular type and then having provider specific implementations of that. So like Azure Machine Pool would map to what we want them to do is map to the canonical auto-scaling thing within your provider, right? So whether it be VMSS in Azure or ASGs in AWS or MIGs and GCP, the idea being that we can basically push some of the logic of doing auto-scaling within provider-specific implementations over to the provider, right? And then sync that status back, or right. So that's the proposal. Take a look. We are going to this is the second write through, Wanley. Okay, so I am due for an edit pass. I will work on that tomorrow, and in short order after that, we want to present to the wider Cluster API group. So anyone who is interested in seeing that move forward and how that's designed, please take a moment to take a look at that. The link is in the agenda.
Yeah, so I just refined that description just a little tiny bit. I would say the first and foremost concern that we're trying to address is being able to manage a set or a group of machines as a single configuration. And then one of the features is that one of the features or benefits that we get from that is auto scaling and all that. So just wanted to clarify that because we won't actually do the auto scaling stuff in, I think, V1 Alpha 3. Thanks, Stephen.
Cool. Awesome. So we, all right, so there was a note about KubeADM now renewing the token.
Yeah, I added that as well. So I guess like we discussed this when we talked about node pool. It's like what happens if a token expires, and we said like, maybe we should do static tokens, and then we're like, no, we're not gonna do that.
Never.
So a new approach has risen in Wild, which is KubeADM for machines will renew the token or will keep renewing the token until the machine has been running. So like if it's in provisioning state, it will keep renewing the token until the machine shows up, or if it's in a failure state, it will just give up at that point. So potentially we can reuse this logic to like if we have like 1,000 machines to spin up and we have to wait for the machine pool, we can reuse this logic to renew the token that we used in the, what's it called, the template. Yes, renew the existing token. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. Do we need to do anything to take advantage of that today?
Yes, the logic is only for machines. It's not gonna, like when we go into machine pool and like we're trying to implement it, like we'll probably have to take some of that logic, make it a little bit more generic because it's very specific to machines, and kind of like try to I don't know, like renew the token until like like we need more machines. But yeah. On the proposal, I had one comment that the implementation pieces are not super clear, so it might take. You might want to take like a little bit more time to like spec out like what the implementation will actually look like. The diagram looks good. And just like explaining like the flow a little bit in just sentences would be great.
Okay, so yeah, that's but when I go through the edit pass, I'll work on some of the implementation details as well.
Thank you.
Right, we have made it to. Before we get started with the project board review, are there any questions, comments, concerns, things you wanted to bring up that are not on the agenda before we jump into it?
I'm a little bit curious. I saw in the bottom of the machine pool notes, it looks like on Friday there was some discussion. And it looks like people did float the idea of why are we not just using machine deployment? Can someone just summarize like the TLDR of why that happened? Because it seems like there was kind of discussion and there wasn't really like in the notes, there's not much resolution as to why.
Yeah, I actually had that question too. So.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the idea was that it's interesting to think about combining the two, but for now, we're going to go ahead with having specific type for machine pool, and then if we find that they end up being nearly identical, we can merge them back together.
So this is kind of just like a way to spike on it separately without interfering with the actual like existing implementation.
Okay. Exactly.
It's a little bit more than that. I admit that I pushed for this because I'm scared of changing things that we know, especially because everybody like today knows that machine pool does one thing and it does it really well. Machine pool, machine deployment. Adding a new optional like field, like you say, like and like we changed logic, we branch out in this path. That could be a possibility. But what that does is that like then you have every time you talk about machine deployment, and you have to a request in that comes in and saying like, are you using machine like the pool side of the machine deployment, or are you using machine backed? And it will create that splitting communication first, and the second thing it will create like weird like code paths that like we will need to take into account. So like is a machine pool with this configuration will do this thing, and new type will just like give like us like the leeway that we need to just like go and be free and do all the changes that we need without impacting current deployments.
That's actually interesting. That makes a ton of sense to me. I actually thought that was kind of the purpose of the infra provider split in part. But I mean, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, we're also getting the benefit of like, so Wanley is working on this stuff, and so he's going to bring his changes into the machine pool branch within CAPZ. What's nice about that is we can define all of the types within CAPZ without having to work on it within CAPI until we prove it out. So.
Yeah, and as I work through the proof of concept, I think there are some commonalities, but there are quite a bit of differences as well that we'll need to account for. And I think, just like Vince said, trying to get that to fit is more hoops to jump through than I think we need to.
Yeah.
Also, fun fact: the machine deployment and machine set code today kind of sucks. So if you want to have fun, go look at that. Like, please do, because we did a lot of improvements there. So. Yeah, I wouldn't want to touch it. It's like it works, but it's like let's just leave. Let's just leave it. It's like.
That's like the server in the background in the server room, and you're like, it's got a sticky note on it that just says like, leave on, don't touch, never unplug.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get into the project board. I have tried to do some of the grooming over the last week or two, but there's still a bit to do, and I didn't want to do it kind of in a vacuum by myself. I wanted to do it with all of you. So the first things that we should take a look at are, let's see if there are any new cards, right, or old cards that are not merged yet. Okay, no, all right. So everything below this line, basically the add v1 alpha 2 types, I'm not adding into the board. So basically the way I'm breaking up the board is all the stuff that was done a while ago is here in this done column. Everything that was done for 2019 Q3 is here, and Q4, which we're in right now, is here. So you can see that we have done quite a bit of work, and it's really just been less than a month. So again, really like hats off to everyone who got involved and like just coded the heck out of V1 Alpha 2. So we have a few different milestones to take a look at, and I think so. We've got 02, 02, which is V1 Alpha 1. This is our 02 release milestone. There is 03, which is V1 Alpha 2. That's our release 03 milestone. And so next is everything where, so people who have done project management kind of across the Kubernetes projects before, next is like the stuff we're punting. And baseline has been, we need these things for the repo to work, right? Release branching strategy, I want to move these to actually into V1 Alpha 3. We kind of know what we're going to do here. Release branching strategy, this was opened a while ago, April, basically to figure out what we needed to do to wire up release engineering tools or what have you. A lot of that stuff has been done already, so I'm going to just kind of add, nope, myself, and do a little write-up and then close that out. Essentially, we're using master as the essentially the next release candidate, and right now we have a release 02 branch, which is V1 Alpha 1. That is, I think it's fair for us to declare that we're not going to do any more V1 Alpha 1 releases. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and sweeping to-dos, I also open this one. I'll make it a priority for V1 Alpha 2. Essentially, I looked over them fairly recently, and I think that what we have in there are kind of code hints. Like there are places where there are to-dos about tagging, right? And they're commented out. They're basically the commented out functions for tagging or additions to the types. So just reminding someone who does pick up the tagging feature to make sure they hit those points. So I think we should keep those unless people have different opinions. All right, so I'm going to close out this baseline milestone. We're done there. Let's take a look at, okay, all right, 100% complete. I'm going to close out the V02 milestone as well. Okay, so we're just doing 03 and next now, which is great. And let's go back to the board and we can sort by milestones or filter by milestones, and we can start talking about some of the stuff, right? So we already talked about the image building and publishing, right? The release to-dos, release engineering tooling. So since I've opened this one, a lot of things have happened in terms of adding release tooling to upstream cluster API, which we take advantage of. I think one of the last things in discussion maybe is the generating release notes. I know there's an issue open for that, right, Vince?
Yes, I think so.
So I tagged, on this issue, I tagged the, I tagged some of the people who are working on the release notes upstream for SIG release. And what I was curious about is if it was actually possible today to use the tool that we use to generate release notes for the Kubernetes releases for any repo. And apparently it is possible, which is pretty awesome. This is what the output looks like. So there are a few things that we might want to do to clean up the way what the issue templates look like or what the PR templates look like. But I think this is, in comparison to the last release I had done, right? So it's pretty similar, right? So Vince, was there like additional conversation about this since then?
No, I think we just punt it for now. Like, I don't know what needs to be done there. I really don't want to lose the emoji though. They look nice.
You like the emoji? So I think we could find a way to blend the emojis in. It might be something where we can maybe target on kind, right? And then have the template generate the emojis instead of forcing people to add emojis to the issues.
It's more adding like the emojis to the PRs. I think I mean, it just helps like to also say like, hey, this is a breaking change. You might need like more of a description, or like this is just like a doc change, so like let it in kind of thing. You know?
Okay. So let me just say blah. All right. All right, let's see if this is kind feature. Does anyone want to grab this? Or I should probably add more of a description before someone grabs it, but is anyone interested in buttoning this one up?
Maybe with more details.
Okay, all right. All right, so I will add more details. And
could maybe label the issues that are like ready to be picked up so that people can just like asynchronously go to the board and pick up stuff.
Help wanted.
We can, yeah. But they basically need some of them need more things.
Yeah. So I mean, once they're ready.
Yeah. For sure. All right, next one is add validating webhook for v1 alpha 2 types. I couldn't tell if this was already done as a result of the port, and just left that open for someone to tell me. Vince, maybe.
We're targeting actually v1 alpha 3 for validating webhooks.
Okay, all right.
So this can be next.
Next, cool. All right, and we will drop this in the backlog. Cool. All right, so supporting existing resources. I feel like we should do that for v1 alpha 2. Does that make sense for people? Basically supporting existing resource groups as well as supporting existing VNets. Yes, no, maybe so.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Cool. So I have active PR here, which needs to be, something needs to happen. I either need to decide if I'm closing this out or rebasing it. But essentially, it does most of the work to support existing resource groups. I just need to make sure it still fits in line with what the v1 alpha 2 work is. So let's see. Let's do this, and let's see what it breaks. Cool. I'll take a look at that later. All right. So implementing Bastion hosts, I feel like we should probably have a call just for this.
Stephen, really quick.
Yep.
Regarding the existing RG, are you? I didn't look at the, but are you looking at the type, or are you adding to the type to be able to provide the RG?
Yeah, it's essentially expanding it's actually making the resource group a type instead of just a pointer to a string, right? So it becomes resource group and then resource group dot name and then the ID, or rather the ID or the name or something. It's either ID or name and then enabled or is enabled or something like that. So that should probably be switched to a pointer to a Boolean. And then the logic needs to be rewired a little bit, but
can we make it work like if the resource group just already exists, we use it?
It checks to see if the name is set, but it needs to also, we need to also determine if you want to do stuff with it within Cluster API, right? So I think what I had set was is managed or is unmanaged or something like that, right? So if,
do you want to comment on this?
So yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, feel free to comment in the PR, but just bear in mind that like it's been a bit since I've touched this one.
Yeah, no worries.
So
it's at least V1 Alpha 2, right?
It's V1 Alpha 1. It's from V1 Alpha 1. So
just throw it out.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So it's basically ID and then managed. And managed is none of this is true anymore now that I know more stuff. But yeah, but basically managed tells you whether or not it should be managed by Cluster API, right, within the lifecycle of Cluster API. So basically, so when we clean up, we don't accidentally delete your resource group that has more stuff in it, right? So yeah, does that sound good, or do you?
Yeah, he says he'll comment on
Yeah,
it.
I'll add some comments.
Okay, cool. This is probably a longer discussion. It's the underlying services, how the services are implemented within how the underlying services are implemented underneath the reconciler, the machine and cluster reconciler. So talking about whether or not we should have like a reconcile delete pattern for each of them. And then that would kind of require us to tweak some of the way the services are defined. But this is probably a longer discussion too. This was wasn't contentious, but you know, it was there was discussion required. Is a short version. This one, so the idea here was I wanted to try to be able to spread the control planes across availability zones if the availability zones were available to control planes. I haven't quite figured that one out. I might close that and look at it with fresh eyes again. But essentially it was like creating a score, putting the score in the cluster, and looking at the score plus the machine name plus what zone it was in, right? So if something was in a certain zone, it would like +1 that score, right? And then basically every time you were going to create a control plane, it would look at that score again and decide whether or not to increment that. But I'm not sure that we want to do that. So we can take a look at that later. The SIG Azure label doesn't exist in the repo. That is true now that we've transitioned from, now that SIG Azure has transitioned into a cluster, into a subproject of SIG Cloud Provider. The reason the SIG Azure label was in this repo was it was migrated in as a subproject of SIG Azure. Since that has folded, I've recently made sure that we are now migrated under SIG Cluster Lifecycle. So if you want to read the details on that one, it is issue 284, and the associated PRs are there. Let's see. Okay. All right. So few things to do. Docs are in progress on my side. Control plane NSG is open to the internet. I'm not sure if this is actually still true. This was opened a bit ago. And this kind of dovetails with the discussion about the Bastion hosts, right? The Bastion stuff, just for context, the Bastion stuff had stalled out a little bit. We initially had a PR open to work on Bastions, but they're kind of in tandem. There was the release of Azure Bastion, but I'm kind of conflicted because Azure Bastion is currently in public preview, I believe, but not available in every region. So I don't want us to create logic for something that everyone can't have, right? So we should talk more about how we want to attack this. Yeah, but if someone wants to, I know Ace, you had mentioned something about that. Do you want to check in on this, Ace?
I can. I don't have super strong opinions on this, except that this is something that my team does in production already, and so I'm familiar with our needs for this scenario, but I can't speak too much to that otherwise.
Okay. All right. So if you want to pick it up, feel free to assign yourself, but no pressure. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. All right. Actually, the next one, cloud provider configuration, right? So this needs to add some details to, but essentially the pre-kubeadm commands also land a cloud provider config on each of the nodes. we should have a way of configuring that stuff, whether it be by, I think in 1.15, we have the capability of doing the cloud provider config by leveraging secrets. But I hear that there are still some requirements to have the file for certain tools. So I don't think that we can strictly go to the secrets-based path. Although within the config, I believe you have the option for file secret or like strategies. So file secret or merge. So file being use the file-based config, secret being if you have any if you have anything configured within the secret, let it override the configuration, that same configuration for from the file, and then merge if something within the file does not exist but exists in the secret, then use the secret type and merge the two configs. So we have to figure out the strategy that we want. We cannot have the cloud provider config in the pre-kubeadm commands. I think this might become a larger question as well towards how we want to handle that across all providers, because I'm not sure that there is a solution for handling cloud provider config for all providers just yet. Maybe that becomes another bootstrap provider thing. Vince, any thoughts on that?
You'll have to repeat the question because I wasn't listening.
Okay, so the cloud provider config, right now we basically see the cloud provider config by using the pre-kubeadm commands, right? Do we want, like, it? I feel like there needs to be a generic solution for that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And maybe we can tackle that in V1 Alpha 3 now that kubeadm is going to merge into the upstream.
Okay, perfect. Cool. All right, and I would say that the rest of the stuff is, okay, is anyone interested in picking up tagging? Or do we think it's not important enough to do right now?
Wasn't the point of this to avoid conflicts between controllers? And I mean, how did AWS resolve this? Like, this was an issue there, and I remember there was some ongoing PRs to fix it.
The cloud provider config?
Well, this was an issue with like KCM and CAPI conflicting with each other, right, or something like that.
So, well, I mean, that's part of it, right? But it's also like, did we set annotations in certain places or labels set in certain places? Are we doing a thing in our reconcile pattern that conflicts with what the cloud provider config is doing? Or, but that's one part of the problem. The fact that we can't see the config is a different part. That's what I'm referring to. In the AWS one, I believe they just reference that you're going to be like cloud providers AWS, and I believe they just leverage IAM to do some of the bootstrapping in terms of like the metadata. So we should figure out if we want to do the same. I think it would be fairly simple for us to wire the what is it, the IMDS. I always get the
yeah.
I always get the order of the acronym wrong.
I think that's right.
Yeah, IMDS, right? So maybe using that instead, maybe using that mode instead, and having things get picked up from the cloud provider config. There's also, I think we're at the point where we can also turn on the system assigned identities if people are interested in doing that. But I want to give anyone an opportunity for closing comments because we are 1 minute over.
I think we need to work on making the issues easier to pick up for newcomers, because that's something I struggled with when I first came to the repo, and I think I don't know how other people feel, but it's still pretty tough to know what's going on where.
And that's actually a big reason that we're only having this kickoff meeting now, even though I've kind of been working on the project for about a year, because it's not easy, and none of it is easy to pick up, and it's extremely hard to do with multiple people not understanding what to do, working on the same stuff at the same time, right? So we're only now in a place where like those things can be properly vetted out and help wanted and all that good stuff, right? I think we were feeling it out before then, but with the V1 Alpha 2 work, we can actually describe what needs to happen. So that is coming soon. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being part of the inaugural CAPZ meeting, CAPZ meeting, right? I will see you in 2 weeks. All right, take it easy.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.